Hi guys, so today I want to talk about the books that I least enjoyed reading in 2024. So with the year coming quickly to an end, I thought it would be worth to take this opportunity and to reflect upon these reading experiences, see if I still remember these books, if I still hate them as much as I did during my reading, and also kind of inform myself and build my knowledge which types of books to stay away in the future, I guess. So let's get into the first book here, and these books are getting increasingly worse till the end of the video. So the first book on my list of least enjoyed books in 2024 is Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. So this was one of the books that I had to read for the Rory Gilmore Girls Reading Challenge, and I would probably not have picked it up otherwise. I was still quite excited to read it. It's a novel, it's a classic, and I was really excited going into this this kind of book. But then the plot didn't click with me, and I didn't really saw a lot happening, and then this kind of confusion between the main character and this schizophrenic plot that everything turns around in this book. It just didn't feel very real to me. It didn't feel very believable to me to really connect to this story and to really connect to this book. I know it's a classic. It's been written a long time ago, and maybe those kind of stories were more popular back then, or I'm just not the guy for classic books, which is something that I think I learned about myself in 2024. But anyway, this was one of my worst reads during 2024, and while I'm glad that I did finally read Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, I would not ever pick this up again at all. So next on the list is The Divine Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood by Rebecca Wells, which is also another book from the Rory Gilmore Girl Challenge. And this one was just way too long, as if I remember correctly. And so what I really did not enjoy about this book is that it jumps back and forth in time, like from chapter to chapter. It's also the plot didn't really feel that interesting, because it's about this what is it, a play director basically living in New York, and she has some issues in her life. She doesn't know whether she wants to marry her boyfriend at the time, and then she is kind of at the loss in her life, and she is looking for some answers, and she's trying to reconnect with her mother through her experiences growing up with that Yaya Sisterhood. And the Yaya Sisterhood is basically her mother and her very close-knitted circle of friends that she had growing up, basically. And then we jump back and forth in time between her mother growing up with these friends and her experiences, and how difficult life was at that time for her, and then between the present, when our character, I don't even remember her name, so it really didn't click with me, that kind of story. And I remember it was a very long read, and there were just not really any highs and lows. It's just like, it would be like almost reading a biography of somebody's life that was not that exciting at all, or at least would not be that exciting for outsiders to read and understand. And the thing about the Yaya Sisterhood, it's actually a series. So I think there's like 2 or 3 more books in there, and I do not feel any interest on even, looking into these books or what they are about. I also felt that it had quite a clear ending. So there's really no interest for me in going into that at all. So I really kind of wish I could have those hours of my life back that I spent on that book. But yeah, there you go. The next one is One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey. And this again is a classic. I was aware that there's also a very famous film produced about this book, this novel, And I did, after reading the book, I watched the movie, and I really did like the movie quite a lot. It was very interesting. They skipped over a lot of, the boring parts, as movie adaptations do. And that was kind of my critic with the book itself. So the book is, for me to read, maybe also because it's an older book, for me to read, it's very confusing on how it builds up its characters, how it builds up the story, and what you should believe and what you should not believe. So it took me quite a few chapters, I believe, to really kind of understand what is going on in the book, what is happening in this psychiatric center that the protagonist is being placed into. Again, this one is, it's a title that I've heard all my life, and I'm glad to have read it. I'm very glad that I've seen the movie with Jack Nicholson. So it was an experience. It was worth the experience, but it was a very painful read as well for me. Next up, we have what I believe was my very first Charles Dickens, which was David Copperfield. And boy, do I hate this book. It's so long, it's so drawn out, and it's just nothing happening in the story. And the way that it is told and it is written is so absolutely confusing that it makes me scared about picking up another Charles Dickens in the future, which I will have to do for the Rory Gilmore Girls Challenge, because I believe there are more of his books in there. But I don't know, I've read this book, and I had to multiple times I had to reread a chapter or reread the same page multiple times to even understand what is going on here. And then the beginning actually starts out quite okay. I mean, it's this story of life of David Copperfield, and again, it's not that much of an interesting story to tell. It's just a lot of family drama, it's a lot of childhood drama, it's a lot of moving around and dealing with the difficulties on growing up in that I don't know when exactly place. I think in the late 1800s. I don't know. Growing up in that period in England, and what the difficulties were connected with that, and all these relationships that he had over this time, and how they impacted his life. But the thing is that it's just. And maybe that's the thing with classic books as well, that they like to be very thick, they like to be very long, and I don't know, were editors not a thing back then? Were there no publishing houses that employed editors that told the authors to shorten it down to the essential stuff? I don't know what was going on in there, but this was like a very painful experience for me to read David Copperfield. And again, it's very sad, because it's an absolute classic. Everybody's talking about it. There's probably tons of movies. There's probably a musical, some plays everywhere about this story, and maybe some of these adaptations I would enjoy if they are shortened down. But the original story, the novel, is not for me at all. Next on the list of least enjoyable books for myself in 2024 was the Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test. This one, interestingly, is actually connected to One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest by Ken Kesey, because this book talks about the life of Ken Kesey. And I would usually found that very interesting, that kind of book, because I love books about true stories, about real people. And he seemed to have a very interesting life, but it's just that this book basically talks about, Ken Kesey road tripping in a party bus basically across the USA, while he and his friends were on drugs 24 hours a day. That's basically what the book is about, and about their hallucinations, about that kind of free world, free wave movement that was going on during the 1960s basically. And the problem here was, number one, I don't like or know anything about drugs, so I cannot really relate with the experiences written down in that book, although they seem to be quite interesting every now and then. The other thing is that just I'm not really interested about the history of that kind of hippie movement of the 1960s at all, either in the US. So and then on top of it, it's just that the writing style felt very confusing to me, because it's written from like a point of view of this Tom Wolfe, which I believe he actually was part of that group for a short period of time, and then told it kind of from his point of view, and then mixing in experiences from other people that he talked to and interviewed. And that made it very confusing for me. Too long, too complicated, not that much of an interesting story or life to tell, in my opinion. So it's definitely a subject that I will stay away from in the next year. Next up, we have one book that is very popular right now, which is Here One Moment by Liane Moriarty. This book is, I think, is like on the bestseller lists now on Audible and in many bookshops worldwide. And I actually have a separate review on that. So if you want to know in detail what my feelings are about this book, you can check out the video right up here. The plot sounded very interesting to me. It's kind of Final Destination, those kind of movies from the plot point of view. So there's this lady at the beginning of the movie. She is on an airplane. She's walking down the airplane and telling every passenger their estimated time of death and the cause of death. And people are, you know, then getting scared and trying to avoid their deaths as foretold by this lady, basically. Problem here is mostly it's too drawn out, the story. That's number one. The next problem is there is no character building here. All the characters in this book feel very flat. They feel like the exact same person. You can barely distinguish between a male and female character. What is often something that annoys me, and you guys heard it a lot already, is the jumping back and forth in time. I don't get it. If you write a book, why can't you just do it chronologically? I get it, like for a book like Project Hail Mary, where you have to jump and forth between time so that some secret is revealed at the end of the story that happened in the past. I understand that, I get that, but when it adds no value, like in terms of revealing a secret, it adds no value to the book. To be told in this kind of non-chronological way with back and forth jumping in between timelines, then I don't see the point of it. Simplify it, put it in one chronological timeline, tell the story of the lady first, and then tell the story of the present. Would that be so difficult? I don't know. Anyway, not going to be picking up any of Liane Moriarty's other novels next year, definitely not. It just goes to show that probably my taste in books is not often what the mainstream taste in books is, I guess. So next up is a short story that I just finished a few days ago, which is The Celebrated Jumping Frog of Calaveras County by Mark Twain. My very first Mark Twain, and again on this book I have a separate video, so you can go and check that out. For me, it's, you know, a kind of a what is the moral of the story kind of story. So it's this kind of Brother Grimmish book with you know, like a witty storytelling that could almost be like one of these old German fairy tales, but it's kind of lacking the moral at the end, and the twist at the end didn't feel very exciting to me. It's a short story, there's not too much to tell from it. The only thing I did realize and that I did like is probably the writing style is quite witty and nice, so maybe I would enjoy some of Mark Twain's longer books, but this one was just, I don't know, it was a waste of time reading that short story for me, basically. So we are getting into the top threes now. So number 3 of least enjoyed books during 2024 for myself was The Good Girl by Mary Kubica. I read this book because I've enjoyed quite a few books of her. I think one was called The Nicest Couple, and I really enjoyed those crime stories that she told in a very I think, suspenseful way. It's kind of a mix between crime and horror story. And I think last year I was reading 2 or 3 of her books, and then I enjoyed all of them, or at least more than this one now. But this one, I think I put it down so many times, and it took me like half a year to finish that book. And it's not that thick of a book, but the story is so slow. So it's basically about the girl that is being targeted by somebody that is supposed to abduct her and then to deliver her to this kind of crime syndicate. But then the abductor kind of has second thoughts and is trying to somehow protect her, and then he is bringing her to this mountainside cabin and keeping her in that mountainside cabin. And again, here in this book, it's told very confusing. So it's told, on one hand, you have to deal with the timelines. So it's like 3 different timelines that they have, like past, present, and then something in between that they have and jump back and forth. Absolutely hate it. And what they also do is they jump back and forth between characters. So it's told from different kind of characters and what is happening to them. And it was so confusing for me to understand what is going on here and kind of order that timeline and those characters and the plot and the story in my head after reading it. And especially after putting it down and maybe not reading for a few weeks and then picking it up, I basically always had to reread the full chapter to kind of be in it again. So this is one of the books where I seriously considered just not finishing at all, which I very, very rarely do. But it just felt like a task that I had to finish in the end, to finish reading this book. It didn't feel enjoyable at all. I didn't think the story was well thought out or plotted. It was not suspenseful. I did not develop any feelings for the characters or anything. 0 points all around. Okay, next up, book number 2 of least liked books during 2024 was Holidays on Ice by David Sedaris. And this book is like a collection of short stories of what I understand was his experiences with the holidays, his experiences with Christmas over a number of years. And then he kind of collected these short stories and experiences, partly autobiographical and partly observed experiences during Christmas. He collected them into like this collection of short stories are set around Christmas. Problem with that is the funny stories are not funny, and the sad stories kind of don't fit the Christmas spirit. It's not something you want to be reading around Christmas. So there's like a story about, you know, what it's like to be an elf at the mall during Christmas. And I know it's a horrible job, and I know it's difficult to deal with people, especially during the holidays and when they're doing Christmas shopping. But it's not, he's trying to keep it fun and witty, and it just doesn't come across for me. And then, you know, go from a story that's supposed to be witty and about an elf during Christmas straight into the next short story, which is basically about domestic abuse. And it just does not fit together at all. So this for me, not enjoyable, 0 points, absolutely hated this book, I'm sorry. And lastly, for place number 1 of least liked books during 2024 for myself, is not a surprise, is the Book of Nowhere by Keanu Reeves and China Miéville, which I also have a separate video about. I thought about where I should be placing and ranking these books, and the main reason this book, the Book of Elsewhere, is at the top of the most disliked reads for me in this year is because I still don't understand what happened in this book. I still don't understand what actually happened in this book. And I've reread so many chapters of it. I went really deeply into it, and I understand it's this kind of retelling of basically this being that cannot be destroyed, and it's following it's basically an adaptation of a comic book that they do. with a whole new story though, but there's no story there. I still don't understand what happened in this book. I read it a few times, I listened to it. I mean, a couple of chapters I read a few times. Like the first chapter I read at least 2, 3 or 4 times, and I also listened to it 2, 3 or 4 times because I really wanted to understand what is going on. And listening to all of your comments, reading some comments online, I don't feel ashamed anymore that I don't understand what's going on in this book, because many people don't seem to understand what's happening in this book. And if you'd ask me right now, what is the Book of Elsewhere about? I don't know. I can't tell you. I've read many chapters multiple times. I have no idea what it is about. It was a waste of my time. The only cool thing about it is the cover design. So yeah guys, thanks for watching. These were my least favorite reads of 2024. Please let me know in the comments below. Did you like or enjoy any of the books that I just mentioned, or did you hate them as much as I did? And otherwise, what would be your least favorite reads of 2024? Let us know in the comments below, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.